Hey, so you're finished with your font and you want to make a final font, or you are in the middle of the design process and you want to be proofing your font in a application like InDesign or Illustrator or what have you. Um, so you're going to want to generate your font, and you have a few options to do that in RoboFont. If you go up to File, you have the generate font button option. You have Batch, which is the extension that we just installed, and we have Test Install. Test Install is pretty popular for when you're working on a font and it's you don't want to mess around with installing and uninstalling and going back and forth in FontBook. You can you can just do test install, and what that will do is kind of install the font behind the scenes, and it does a couple of things to um, try to prevent it, the font from getting stuck in the cache of these programs. So it usually works pretty well, but there is a few drawbacks of um, the font will be uninstalled when you close the UFO. So if you wanted to close the UFO and you wanted to continue working on your proof or something, that wouldn't be an option with this with test install. And you still might, in in some cases, run into issues where there's a font cache issue where you might be accidentally looking at a font that is not the most current font. But this is a good first option. You're working on this font. We're going to test install it. It does a little bit of compiling. It gives you a little output. And if everything goes according to plan, you can find this font, which is called Casserole, in the font menu. And so if we go back to our font, if we do something like we delete the crossbar on this A, um, and we do another test install, it generates, gives us another report, and if everything goes according to plan, that we're looking at the most recent version of that font, so that's good to go. Um, the issue is that sometimes you might not be able to tell if you have the most recent version of the font. So if you kind of want to be more certain, or you want to be more manual with the process, there's another option. There's a few other options in RoboFont. But to uninstall this font right now, we're going to close this font, the UFO, and InDesign gives us a missing font dialog. That means it worked. So we're going to go back to RoboFont, and we have our My Cool font open. We're going to open Casserole again. And we're going to put back the crossbar that we took away. um, so another option is generate font. So generate font will make an OTF or TTF version of your font. So you have a little bit more of options for configuration here. So you have what layer it's generating. You usually just want the default layer or the foreground layer, as it might be called. You have decompose, which is always checked and grayed out for OTFs because that's kind of a requirement for an OTF. Remove overlap, which is any overlapping contours that will make flat. Auto hint, which means PostScript auto hinting in this case, in release mode, which it means a lot of things. It's mostly a setting in the Adobe font development kit. It's kind of a flag for that. And you kind of only want to check these two if you are completely done with your font and you have made all your hinting settings. Um, and if you have no idea what hinting settings I'm talking about, it's probably best for you just to uncheck those for now. Hinting is a whole other bag of worms. But right now we're going to generate this font. It's going to generate it just like it did when it was a test. And we're going to open up our menu, and we can install it just by opening it up in the font book. We can search for Yeah, here it is. We made it. Casserole is installed, and if we go back to our proofing document, it should install just the same. And then if you wanted to make sure you were looking at the most recent version, you would uninstall this by removing it from FontBook. Go back, make sure that it's uninstalled, and then you would regenerate another OTF with the changes, and then you would install it again. But this way you have a OTF file that you could still work with even if you were to close this UFO, and you can still work with it even when the RoboFont or the UFO is closed. So that's great for generating just one font, but if I wanted to generate this one, I'd have to go File, Generate, and then if I wanted to generate this one, go to File, Generate. And so if you have a bunch of fonts that you want to generate at once, it's, you know, a little bit tedious. So that's where the third option comes in, Batch, which is the extension that we just installed. You can add all the open UFOs. You can check which format you want to include, or formats that you want to generate. Variable fonts are only available if you have a design space file, and that's more of an advanced file that kind of ties together a bunch of UFOs. But you can just check, I want an OTF for the desktop, I want a TTF for WAF for the web, and you have this little gear button for making settings. These are generally the settings that I just talked about in the other view. For web fonts, you have a variety of different settings that you should, especially for TTF auto hinting, you should consult the documentation for TTF auto hinter if you're interested in what these settings do. We have an option to generate HTML. It will generate a HTML proof for us, which is pretty cool. Variable fonts, you have options here, and batch settings where you can either rename the files to use a standard form of naming or keep the file names as is with the UFOs. That's about it for the settings. And so we can just hit generate. We're going to generate it to the same spot. And it will take a little bit because it's generating two different formats for two different font files. It has two different things going on. But all in all, it's faster than if I were doing all that stuff manually. So it gives you two folders, one for desktop, one for web, and it gives you a generation report. Mostly you would just want to look out for if anything says error in these little areas. Warning is okay, note is, you know, completely fine. If anything says error, that's something to look out for. And so we have our OTFs for our font. We also have our web fonts, and we have a preview of for our checking our web fonts that the batch made for us. It was very nice of it. And yeah, that's how you can generate font three different ways from RoboFont. And that's basically it.